Leadership.
Sorry, I forgot to hit the record button.
That's okay. Leadership is an activity, not a position. Anyone can lead anytime, anywhere. It starts with you and must engage others. Your purpose must be clear, and it's risky. Next slide. Next slide is leadership is. Leadership is mobilizing people to make progress on deep, daunting, adaptive challenges. The tough stuff. What we're talking about here, what we aim for agency-wide, is mobilizing people to make progress on difficult work. That's what it boils down to. Next slide. So these are the 4 competencies, and we're going to briefly look at these when thinking about engaging unusual voices. So the first one, diagnose the situation. So how do engaging unusual voices help to meet the goal or the purpose of what we're doing? Who's not represented? Who's at the table? Who's missing? What input would be beneficial? How do we identify unusual voices, and how do we engage them? The next one, managing self. How can I contribute to engaging these unusual voices? What skills, connections, or abilities do I possess that could help with this challenge? Energizing others. Does this challenge require raising the heat? And if so, what does that look like? How do we energize those already at the table and those who are not? And last one, intervene skillfully. Let's make a thoughtful and inclusive plan to ensure that unusual voices are included, heard, and valued. So the next slide, you may have recognized this drawing. We've all seen it a few times probably. So distinguishing technical work and adaptive work is something that is important and can be tricky. So our work with KLC has taught us that technical problems live in people's heads and logic. These are susceptible to facts and expertise. Adaptive challenges live within us, in people's hearts and in our stomachs. They're about values, loyalties, and beliefs. So let's talk about some technical challenges around engaging unusual voices. What might be done? Maybe something as simple as reaching out directly. Hey, Lydia, we'd love to hear from you, your perspective on blah, 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 blah. When might you have availability to join in on a conversation about this? Or asking, how can we ensure that people can share their voices? What barriers can we assist in removing? For example, is scheduling time an issue? What other things can we do to reach out and get these folks included and heard? Are we being intentional and clear as we invite, connect, and include? And lastly, what steps have been taken to identify unusual voices, being aware of who hasn't been included or heard from, thinking outside the box of who it might be beneficial to engage in. So questions for engaging unusual voices with adaptive challenges could be questions like, how can we connect and express the importance of hearing from these people that we may have not otherwise heard from? Has a seat been reserved at the table for these folks? Is it understood that, yes, we do want to hear from you, and this is why? Do others in the group understand the importance and value of hearing from everyone? And can we provide support for people that may feel that their voice isn't needed or essential, or maybe they're shy or uncomfortable with sharing their ideas or their perspectives? How can we provide a space that is welcoming and supportive? For some people, maybe speaking up is out of their comfort zone, which I wouldn't know anything about. Just kidding. Back to you, Lydia.
Thank you, Nancy. I love it. I love it. You're taking a risk, by facilitating this session today. And I think that just shows the many ways that we can exercise leadership at DECA. Nancy gave us a really great sort of foundational level view of the KLC concepts and sort of set the tone for the work that we're going to do. And now we're going to zoom in a little bit with that header that she mentioned, energizing others. So when we're talking about the competency energizing others, what we're really talking about is engagement. So meeting each and every stakeholder where they're at to engage them in the way in which they feel comfortable. And we're talking about every stakeholder, right? Not just those usual suspects, the ones with the loudest voice, for example, or the ones with the most influence, but also those less likely to have their voices heard. In the KLC book, Your Leadership Edge, which many of you have copies of, there's a really great quote that's used to frame energizing others. Success comes when all parties are genuinely and appropriately engaged and activated. I really think that's true. And I also believe it can be really difficult to do. Energizing others can be pretty slow work, but it's absolutely imperative when we're creating a process that people trust. And in the work that we do at DECA, we want to make sure we have that trust. I think one of the most critical components of energizing others is to engage those new and unusual voices. And the reason why I feel that it's so critical is because it's all about relationship building, right? To me, relationship building is at the heart of engaging unusual voices or new voices. And since we're in the business of serving people at DECA, we really can't do that unless we build those relationships. So let's dig into that a little bit more. All right, so what does it mean to engage new and unusual voices? When we're working on adaptive challenges, the old way of involving the same old group, having the same discussions, trying things we've already tried before just isn't going to work. But the question then becomes, how do we break out of that, right? I think one of the keys is to make space for new voices, new ideas, new experiences, new perspectives. We do that by engaging unusual voices. But if we're going to start thinking about engaging those new and unusual voices, I think first it's important for us to define who our go-to voices might be, or who our usual voices might be. I'd love to hear some examples in the chat of who some of your go-to voices might be in your life. So that could be your work life, your home life, whatever. Who are some of your go-to voices? Some of the people that you regularly interact with or lean on. Trusted loved ones, yeah. Coworkers on your team, friends. Absolutely. Who else? Friends and sisters, cool. Yeah, people in your department, right? Church, absolutely. Mom, yeah. These are all great examples, and feel free to keep them coming as you brainstorm. So our usual voices or our go-to voices are our go-to crew, right? The people in our department. I think Sarah mentioned that. Our most trusted coworker. It could be the people we live with. Like Deanne mentioned, her husband, her adult children, who you don't live with anymore, but you did at one time. Our circle of friends, right? People we understand maybe as like-minded individuals, the people we tend to go to, the people we engage with often. So for example, at work, I tend to engage with my fellow community-based services coworkers quite often, right? Especially my direct team. So those 4 or 5 people that I work with almost daily. At home, I'm a middle child, 3 out of 4, and I tend to go to my siblings quite often for things. So those are just a couple examples. These are the people in our lives who we feel most comfortable engaging with. So then who might the unusual or the new voices be that we're talking about? Well, it's flipping the script. So these are the people and groups that we seldom engage with. But I think there are a couple key characteristics that help us identify those new and unusual voices. So these are people who have some skin in the game, a stake in the issue at hand, but whose opinion might be rarely asked for typically. These are also people on the outside of our immediate circles, but they have the influence that you need to really make that change, to really make progress on that adaptive challenge. So for example, in prevention, we do a lot of work around youth drug and alcohol misuse prevention, but a lot of times in the work that we do, we forget to engage the youth in that work. We forget to ask their opinion, involve them in the work, but that topic matters a whole lot to them, and they have a lot of influence with their peers, right? So we need their input, we need their perspective, their voice at the table to really make those changes that we want to see in order to reduce youth drug and alcohol misuse. So I'm curious again for you all, what are some examples that you'd like to share in the chat of who some of those new or unusual voices might be in your life? Again, could be at work, could be at home. And I also want to say while you're thinking, it's okay if you don't know right off the bat, because that's why we're here, right? To dig into into who those new and unusual voices are. If we knew who they were and we'd already engaged them, they'd already be at the table, right? If this came easy, we wouldn't be talking about it today. But I'm curious if you could stretch your brain a little bit and think about who those unusual voices might be. Martha, great example. So typically at DECA, it's the overnight recovery support specialist staff with the behavioral health residential programs. Love that example. Other examples, either in the work that you do or at home. Yeah, people outside of your bubble. I think about at home, I'm planning a family reunion, and if you're like me, I tend to go to my siblings, but I forget about maybe engaging my cousins in Arizona and Utah to figure out how we're going to get the entire family together, right? Great. In prevention, it could be the alcohol distributors. That's a great example. Coalition members, neighbors. Yeah, I love it. I love thinking about both the personal and professional because these are concepts we can apply throughout the many identities that we have in our life. When we're talking about these adaptive issues, like I mentioned earlier, these are issues that really resonate in people's hearts and our guts. But when we are working on adaptive issues that don't have a clear answer, it's really, really imperative to bring into the conversation everyone, not only those who are the first folks that we think of, the first set of people that come to mind, those with influence or the loudest voice, like I mentioned earlier. So what holds us back from engaging new and unusual voices? It's tough when we work on tough, sticky, complicated, messy things with a lot of different facets. There are a lot of reasons why we might intentionally or unintentionally choose not to engage new and unusual voices. I'm wondering what might some of those be. I'm wondering if you all have any ideas. What holds us back? What keeps us from engaging those new and unusual voices when we're working on these adaptive, complicated challenges? Trust. Very good. Yeah. Maybe that trust isn't there. Maybe we don't trust them. Maybe they don't trust us. Maybe nobody trusts nobody. That was bad grammar. Don't hold it against me. It's uncomfortable working with new people. Absolutely. Stepping out of our comfort zone can be tough. Yeah. Unfamiliarity. Yeah. That uncertainty can be a little scary. Identifying those folks. Exactly. When we first, dove into that question of who are the new or unusual voices in our lives, it takes a minute for us to even think about who might that be, right? Because we're used to interacting in those same circles in our comfort zone. Very good. Yeah. So in addition to what you've all shared, which are great points, I think there are a couple other reasons why we might not, or at the very least might hesitate to engage new and unusual voices. So those folks might not initially be interested in whatever we're working on, right? Particularly if we haven't established a connection or built a relationship with them, like Neri mentioned. And we'll get into that more in a little bit. So that initial disinterest could lead to perceived rejection on our end, right? So like, let's never tap into that. So we never have to feel that awkwardness of like, this isn't going to work out. And sort of in that same vein, or maybe parallel to that perceived rejection, our assumptions about what some people care about or are capable of can get in the way. Again, this happens often, I think, or somewhat often in our world of prevention. We think, again, going back to youth, they don't care about the issues we're working on, or we're hesitant to trust that they're able to engage in these issues and be those change makers. They absolutely can and will be, by the way. But you see where we can get held back on that idea of like, our assumptions that we have about a person or a particular group of people can keep us from engaging with them. It's also outside of the box, which many of you mentioned, which means it's a little outside of our comfort zone. It's uncharted territory. We don't know what to expect. That can be a little dicey, right? Who wants to put themselves in a situation that feels very unknown and unfamiliar? But I think one of the biggest things that can hold us back is that it takes time. because it's about building relationships, building connections, building trust. Like Miri mentioned, you can't just like barge in and start making asks without really taking the time to understand and build a rapport with those new voices that you want to engage. It takes a lot of time to build that authentic connection, to be able to engage in a meaningful way. But here's the thing. If we don't engage those new and unusual voices, we're going to get stuck. We're not going to make the progress that we want to make because we're missing out on those key perspectives. So let's talk about that. To talk about this, though, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Thanks, Lydia. So this slide is titled Why. This is the why. So we want you to think of a time when you've had the opportunity to have your voice be heard. It could be at work or at home. And now think of one word to describe that experience. And when you're ready, type it in the chat. Just think about a time, anytime. Well, we can move on. So, oh, impactful. Thank you, Lydia. Rosa, I feel like my needs matter, valued. Yep, these are all really positive things. Felt important. Yeah, these are great. These are great. Okay, so this list demonstrates what's in it for those unusual voices too. This is the one reason why engaging unusual voices matters, because as you just described, when our voices are heard, it makes us all feel all the things. So to engage those unusual voices genuinely, when we stop to consider and consult with those that are often left out of decision-making, we are increasing ownership and buy-in among the group. And when we do that, those voices benefit the process, which will in turn more clearly define our purpose and strengthen our efforts. If we don't have unusual voices at the table when we're looking on a leadership challenge, we'll miss things. We're not ever going to know what we don't know, right? We can't fully comprehend what possible solutions there are to a challenge when there are gaps in understanding because voices are missing. And that's because unusual voices often see an issue from a different angle. They offer a different or a unique perspective. They bring other loyalties, values, and even influence. So when we engage unusual voices, we can better respond to challenges with a more comprehensive approach because we're able to consider multiple perspectives, which ultimately positions us to be more effective in making progress on those challenges. So when you engage those unusual voices genuinely and effectively, we can draw from those skills and experiences unique to those voices. And in turn, you'll be able to develop more effective strategies to tackle what we're working on. This leads to better outcomes, and the ownership and buy-in also leads to increased sustainability to our efforts. So even though engaging unusual voices is risky and time-consuming, it is necessary. So next slide. What does this look like? How can we engage unusual voices? How we engage unusual voices will look very different depending on the work we're doing, right? So we can't give you a specific roadmap from start to finish of what this looks like, but we can offer a few suggestions to support you. The first one is be invested. Like Lydia was saying, take the time to create healthy bonds and relationships. People want to feel valued and know that what they're doing is making a difference. Only after we work to understand them can we begin to ask for their feedback on these challenges. Second suggestion, when we seek their feedback, it's best to do so early and often, as my dad would say, it's his favorite sayings. Be receptive to their input and don't gather their feedback without giving a reason why we want to hear from them. Use what they want to share with us to guide the effort and direct the work. This isn't always easy when there are other elements at play, but if we seek feedback, we need to put it to use. Third suggestion, when working on an adaptive challenge, both as a group and individually, these challenges can provide us with opportunities to build skills that can be critically important for those unusual voices waiting to be engaged. We can be intentional about helping others build their capacity and voice while we're working alongside them and engaging those unusual voices. Reward and acknowledge the contributions that have been made. Celebrate any progress being made on these challenges. We want to recognize all voices, but particularly those unusual voices who are now engaged. It goes back to the relationship building piece and that investment we're making in one another as human beings as we work through our challenges. And finally, don't forget to have some fun. Digging into leadership challenges can be tricky. Fun is critical and valuable for the betterment of the process. The fun is building our capacity to take on these challenges, social interactions, building relationships, and interactive activities, develop our confidence and our knowledge as an individual. Interpersonal activities can build trust among the group, so even the fun parts strengthen our ability to work on leadership challenges. So don't forget the fun.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. Okay, you all, now it's your turn. We want to give you all time to reflect on your experience or thoughts or questions that you have about engaging new and unusual voices. So what we're going to do is go into breakout rooms, and we'd love for each person to share. So this is a bit of a choose your own adventure. So either you can share about a time when you were working on a leadership challenge and you either did or did not engage those new and unusual voices and what the outcome was, or in thinking of your work at DECA, what is a challenge you've been working on and who are some new and unusual voices you can engage? So you can pick which one you'd like to answer. And then we'd love for each room to pick a person to take notes and report like one takeaway that the group discussed. Does that sound okay? Any questions before we zoom away? Mike, let's do, what do you say, like 10 minutes?
Okay, how many breakout rooms?
It'd be nice to have at least 3 people in each breakout room. And if you all get done sharing your first answer and want to try the second one, if you have time, that's cool too. Really just a time for us to reflect on how this relates to the work that we're doing.
Okay, I'm getting there right now.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everyone's lovely faces. While Mike's working, we do want to give a shout out to him for being our tech aficionado today. Thank you, Mike, for being our producer. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Okay, and you said 10 minutes?
Yes, please.
10 minutes. We're good there. And here we go.
All right. See you back soon, everybody.
Did I miss Leanna? No.
Woo! How do you feel, Nancy?
Okay,
Rocking it.
you're a tough act to follow, Lydia.
No,
You're a natural speaker. Very
we're a good team. We need to do these more often.
Nancy's all over it.
That's right. She's a boss.
Not really.
You have a good speaking voice. It's very soothing.
It is good.
I think it takes me back to the 10 bazillion hours I read books to my kids.
Oh, I love it. You're very skillful.
Well, and you always throw in a word that because you sit there and said that you're going to read the script. And so you can't really tell you're reading the script, and then you'll throw in a word that makes it even more.
Okay, we all back?
I think so.
Looks like we are. Okay. So let's start with room number 1, Alondra, Christine, and Deanne. Which question did you choose and what'd you come up with?
We talked a little bit about both and everything. We talked about, sometimes the unusual voices are actually the obvious ones that we overlook, sometimes going right to the direct need. Sometimes we talk around issues and we talk about issues, but the whole nothing about us without us, going right to the individual. We also talked about making sure that we are making room for having those engagements. Sometimes it's outside of our work, and making space, getting out of our comfort zone so that we can have those conversations with others instead of staying in our little bubble. And that we need to have the other competency in mind about meeting people where they are, because sometimes when we're engaging with those unusual voices, it can be risky, it can be uncomfortable, and definitely out of our comfort zone. And so having that mindset of that meeting people where they are, that we're all going to have different perceptions, and we need to be able to be mindful of that. And so we make space for that.
That's great. That's good. Okay, so room number 2, Joy, Kimberly, Leanne, and Lexi. What'd you guys come up with?
Well, you know me, I forgot that we were supposed to be taking notes. So we didn't do that. We just kind of talked about both questions too, though, and just how sometimes you just don't think of the obvious unusual voices, you know. And then when I can't remember who it was, and she's not on there right now, Leanna, she was talking a little bit about how she's learning some of these techniques, you know, and then she's trying to figure out how to apply them in her home and her work. So she thought those were good things. Talked about breaking down the silos and getting those voices in when we're at work that we don't think about including sometimes. So talked a little bit about that. So, and just in communities, how you can get voices heard that you just never thought, you know, like our drug endangered children. Never occurred to us to ask the roller skating rink owners to be part of it. They came to us when they heard about us and said, oh, all those kids get dropped off at the skating rink. We would have never thought about that. So that's just one of those unusual voices that came to us. Instead of us reaching out to them, they reached out to us. So that was good.
Good. That's a good example too. Okay, room number 3, Martha, Michelle, and Millie.
Yeah, we kind of talked about what everybody else did as well. And we just talked about breaking your habit. You know, we all get in the habit of one person always does something for us. So we just continue to rely on them when there's probably others that can do it, but we're just creatures of habit. So we ask Lydia every time because she's done it for us. She always comes through when, you know, maybe Nancy or somebody else could do it as well. But we just talked about breaking your own habits of going to the same people all the time and thinking of others that could do it. And one other thing that Martha kind of talked a lot about was, especially within DECA, is like getting the weekend crew and the night crew, getting them involved and making sure that we're trying to accommodate when they could be at stuff and not leaving them out, because a lot of times they do kind of get the forgotten shift. We do everything on a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 when not everybody works 8 to 5, and so just trying to make more of an effort to accommodate them. And we do that, and then we relax on it and it's not happening. So just kind of bringing to mind that we still need to reach out to them and take into consideration that not everybody works Monday through Friday 8 to 5, but there still could be a valuable person on the team that maybe we're just not meeting at a time where they can show up and be active.
Excellent, good points. Okay, last but not least, room 4, Neri and Rosa. Should we flip a coin? Who wants to talk?
We kind of all just talked about our experiences. Like I said, I was like an intern, so I am actually out there listening to new voices because I'm trying to figure out the whole office and each department and stuff. So that was kind of my experience. And then another person said about how she, when she's encountering people to put in their car seats, their time length's not very long, but she's able to like engage with them and stuff. And if anybody else from my group wants to add, because that's all I can remember.
One of the things that we also talked about was that a lot of us work alone individually. And so how we engage other people and try to work around that, work with other people.
Awesome.
So, I was looking at this chat and I only saw Neri and Rosa, so I apologize, Samantha, Sarah, and Sydney. I guess apparently you guys are in that room too. I'm sorry about that.
Easy to do, man, that chat, I'm telling you, technology. That was great. I really appreciate hearing from everybody in the room, because Nancy and I were talking about yesterday as we were preparing for this. We're not the experts. This is the cool thing about leadership being an activity, is we all get to engage in it together, and we all bring our own experiences and perspectives to it. So to get the chance, for you all to share your thoughts about it, I think is one of the best parts about these workshops. I have one more slide, which literally I just want to show you because I'm really happy with my gifts. But it's just to say thank you for being with us and diving into the idea of engaging those new and unusual voices. We'd love to hear from everybody in the chat. One way that you're going to take this concept or engage those new and unusual voices in the work that you do at DECA in the next 30 days. So it could be a small little action item or a big project that you're working on. What's one way that you're gonna use this in your work at DECA? And I'll stop sharing so you're not distracted by all the waving. You can also unmute too, of course. I know I've been thinking about this in some of the coalition work that we do. In Douglas County, we have a drug and alcohol prevention coalition. And as we kind of take a break for the summer and regroup, I'm thinking about, who are the people that are missing from the table? Who are those folks that we want to engage around the topic of youth drug and alcohol prevention that aren't there? Where are the silos that we can break down the work? And so I think one commitment I can make is in the next 30 days, outreaching 3 new partners, at least starting that outreach and starting that conversation. Nice. Nancy said, begin to connect to someone I don't know very well or at all at DECA. I love that. That's a great way to put this into practice. Leanna said, receive and ask for feedback from clients and coworkers. Deanne said, engage with others who have instructed mental health first aid that I do not usually work with. Awesome. Martha said, reach out to a couple of third shift staff and see what they might like to have as an activity with Living Well. Love it. Those are all great ways to put this into practice. It's fun to think about the concepts, but it's really most useful for us to think about how we can apply them in the work that we do. So thanks for engaging in that activity with us. I think that's all we have for you all. Thanks again so much for joining us. Make sure you stay on top of the schedule so you can come back for the next workshop. If you're interested in learning more about DECA Lead and you haven't, gone through the program yet, reach out to Chrissy Mayer. There's her email address to find out when the next session will be, but definitely encourage you to do it. It's a great way to stretch your wings and step out of your comfort zone and get to connect with other people across all departments. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. Have a great
Thank you.
afternoon.